Hi, and welcome back. Natalie Sandoval and Jaquel Nickram here again, and this time we're going to move through another short training with you, and this one is going to focus on school selection and placement. So what we're really going to look at in this brief presentation is understanding MCKinney-Vento school selection rights, and that's going to include school of origin, school of best interest, boundary school, and then looking at the rights of our unaccompanied homeless youth. So before we dive into that, we did really just want to take a moment to address MCKinney-Vento and FERPA. Schools and LEAs, we really have to ensure that we are complying with all relevant privacy laws that relate to FERPA. And under the MCKinney-Vento Act, schools must treat information about the living situation of a student experiencing homelessness as part of that educational record. So it is subject to all the protections that surround FERPA. So MCKinney-Vento, as we looked at in the first presentation, that definition of homelessness includes children and youth who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. And so our goal with MCKinney-Vento is certainly school stability, and we know that there's so many factors that surround that goal when it comes to students experiencing homelessness. But our purpose is really to address those barriers that children and youth that are experiencing homelessness face, which can often affect the enrollment process. It can affect their attendance and then overall their success in school. So we're going to look much more deeply at what the school of origin is, but we do want you to know that it includes both the designated receiving school at the next grade level, if there is a feeder school pattern, and our district does have a feeder school pattern. So we're going to look a lot more in depth in the coming slides of what that means to keep a child in their school of origin. But it is important that keeping a child in the school of origin is for the duration of their homelessness. So what that means, when we're assessing our families, and we start to assess families in July for the coming school year. And so if we deem that they are MCKinney-Vento eligible in July, but yet that family finds housing in February of that school year, they still are eligible for MCKinney-Vento for the duration of that year, even though they may have found permanent housing. And again, we're going to give you some examples of that as we move through these slides. Another key piece of that is transportation. Transportation to the school of origin is also required, again, through the complete academic year. And if it's in the student's best interest to remain in that school, then again, we have to look at transportation as a factor in maintaining that school stability. So these next slides are really going to talk a little bit more about what the school of origin is and that feeder school pattern. So school of origin, how do we define that? For homeless children and youth, they have the right to attend that school of origin. So it's the school that the child or youth attended when permanently housed, or the school in which the child or youth was last enrolled. And so when we look at that, it can get a little tricky. So let's look first at receiving schools. What does that mean? So when the child or youth completes the final grade level served by the school of origin, the term school of origin shall include the designated receiving school at the next grade level for all feeder schools. So to give us an example in our district, if I'm a child and I'm attending Park Ridge Elementary, then naturally I hope to continue on to East Valley, the feeder school, and then attend Columbia High School, which is the feeder school for East Valley. So that school of origin, it becomes really important, because if I'm a child that starts and I am permanently housed in Park Ridge boundary, just again to use that as an example, that school of origin then becomes Park Ridge. That's where I was permanently housed. But if I am unfortunately evicted during my 5th grade year and over the summer, and so now I'm ready to go on to East Valley, but now I'm staying over at a shelter that puts me in the boundary of West Middle School, we really want to try to work hard to keep that student in their school of origin. And so in this case, following that feeder pattern would now be East Valley. And so that becomes really important. This is a child that has been with their peers for their 5 years, we want to try to see them move forward with their peers. And so that's what we really try to look at in this example of the school of origin and that feeder school process. And so again, just another example that if a student is enrolled in School A, so again, our past example was Park Ridge. So the previous example that we shared with you was the example of a student who had been permanently housed and then was having to relocate potentially, and how that was going to affect where they would now attend a middle school. So school of origin can become even more complicated when we see a student that might be coming into our district from an entirely different district. So if we have a student that was going to elementary school in Boise, so in this example School A, but now is staying with a friend in Nampa and needs to go to a middle school where they're located in Nampa, the reality of trying to get them back to the middle school, which is the school of origin in Boise, becomes really difficult and complicated by transportation. So that's an example of where this can get really difficult in the receiving school and feeder school process. And so Jaquel and I work really, really hard with those families to try to determine, is school of origin within the best interest, or do we need to start looking at the local boundary school? And Jaquel's going to start to share with you a little bit more of what the boundary school definition means, and also what it means to determine the best interest for a family. So I'm going to pass it back over to Jaquel to start talking about those things.
Thanks, Natalie. This is Jaquel. Next, we'll look at our local attendance area or boundary school. This pertains to any public school that non-homeless students who live in the attendance area in which the child or youth is actually living are eligible to attend. So Nampa School District has online the little boundary tool. So if you get on Nampa School District's website, for under parents, you should be able to find the boundary tool. This helps not only Natalie and I determine what school the child is in within that boundary, but also that's what Nampa School District uses to determine what school is best for that child under the local attendance area. But oftentimes that might not be applicable to the families that we might be working with. It becomes pretty complicated. So please contact Natalie or I if you have any questions about using the online tool for designated boundary schools, or if you need any type of assistance to what school a child may need to attend. This also applies to preschool as well as the feeder school for preschools. This does not include charter schools or private schools. If you have any questions about that, please let Natalie or I know. Next, we'll look at School of Best Interest. The MCKinney Vento team will work with the student, parent, and school in determining what should be the school of best interest. So when the school of origin is not an option, oftentimes we even have kids that live out of state, and going back to their school of origin is not in their best interest. And Natalie and I really look at this case-by-case situation, as well as work with the school principal, registrars, in determining what is the best school for this child. The district will always presume that keeping the child or youth in their school of origin is in their best interest, but when this is contrary to a request of a parent, legal guardian, or the unaccompanied youth, we really try to work with them on what may work best. The state has put out a document that Natalie and I go through that has a bunch of student-centered questions and factors related to what is in the child's best interest to keep them or in that school, or what would be the best school for them. When school of origin is not an option, we'll go through these series of questions to help the family make an informed decision, or unaccompanied youth make an informed decision. As we look at things to consider in determining best interest, these areas include not only the student's age, what grade they may be going into or grade placement, as well as the student's history. They may be on an IEP or some type of 504 plan. We really try to make sure that this history is also involved, especially when a family might be moving rather frequently, that can become an important factor in choosing a school. We also look at the students' academic strengths. Natalie and I are both social workers, so we really try to work on strengths-based perspective for students as well as the families. We also look at the student's social and emotional state in determining if this school is a good fit for them. The distance to commute to and from school can also be a factor, and the impact it can have on a family or student. We'll also sit down and determine what is the child's safety plan, if there is one, and what the student might need if there's any type of special accommodations or special instructions. As I mentioned, if a student might have an IEP or 504 plan. Next, we'll look at unaccompanied youth. This is really important because our unaccompanied youth have rights under the MCKinney-Vento Act, and they should be able to enroll immediately. They do not need proof of guardianship when they go to enroll. So unaccompanied youth have the right to enroll themselves. Natalie and I really try to work with unaccompanied youth on selecting a school or keeping that child in the school of origin. We always try to make sure that the school of origin is in their best interest, and if it's not, we'll sit down and work with that unaccompanied youth in providing not only transportation but helping them get enrolled. So when you have an unaccompanied youth come to you, either give them the student questionnaire form or they're doing that online enrollment piece, and there are questions pertaining to if they're living with a parent or legal guardian. So make sure that that student is checking that box for unaccompanied youth, and we'll make sure that that student is getting enrolled as quickly as possible. And if there is any type of dispute that would come about, the MCKinney-Vento liaison will ensure prompt fairness and resolution in working with that unaccompanied youth, because they don't have a parent that's going to help support them. So it's Natalie and I's job to really try and support that student. Next, we'll look at our dispute resolution. Process. If after conducting a best interest determination, that form that we normally go through, and the school determines that it is not in the child's best interest to attend that school, or the school requested by parent, guardian, or unaccompanied youth, the school must provide the parent, legal guardian, or unaccompanied youth with a written explanation of the reasons that they have determined that that student cannot go to that school. The written explanation must be in a matter and a form in which the individual parent, legal guardian will understand, and it must include their right to appeal. The child or youth shall be immediately enrolled in the school in which they are seeking enrollment, while Natalie and the student and parent go through the dispute process, including all available appeals. Student must also receive all services for which they are eligible for, including IEP, 504 plans, or any other type of extracurriculars, until the final resolution and dispute process is complete. The dispute resolution form is available at the MCKinney-Vento office, and your school should be giving you that written explanation form for their decision. Here are a list of the resources, and again, Natalie and I are here to work with you. If you have any questions, please contact us. Here is our contact information, our emails, and our extensions. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact us, and thank you for your time.